Welcome, welcome, welcome to Planet First Action, and happy Sunday. My name is Jacob Frost.
And I am Ryan Gordon. And we really hope that you all had a wonderful and a restful Thanksgiving and a holiday weekend, and used the time to really rest and recuperate as we begin to close out 2024. I mean, it is amazing. It's the beginning of December.
I know. I mean, there's going to be so many people back on the roads heading back to get ready for the hitting the work again tomorrow. And for myself, all I know is that right now I'm at a crossroads.
What do you mean?
Well, you know this about me, Ryan. I'm the kind of person that goes all in. I'm either not going to do it or I am, but if I am going to do something, I am going to do it all the way.
Definitely. That is absolutely true. I know that for sure.
And here's the thing is that right now, I've just been having so much more pie than usual that right now I either need to double down and just eat everything over the next few days, or I need to completely stop eating entirely, and I don't know which one of those I'm going to choose yet.
Well, if I had to guess, I'm definitely leaning more one way than the other, that's for sure. But I wonder, now that you say that, I wonder if that's actually where the expression cold turkey comes from. But I'll spare you the quote about moderation because I know it's moot.
It certainly is, but I appreciate it. And that's maybe that's what we're here to do. We're here to draw those parallels between idiomatic expressions and Thanksgiving meals. But anyway, enough about food. And on to part 3 of this Thanksgiving special, which features Assembly OSM, the pioneering company building the future of homes today. In part 1, we got to tour their prototype in Brooklyn, New York. And in part 2, we sat down with Andrew Staniforth, CEO of Assembly OSM, to learn from his valuable perspective in leading the company forward.
That's right. And for those of you who tuned in last night for part 2, we told you Andrew was magnetic, didn't we? He is captivating as a speaker and just such a remarkable leader. His insights are uniquely valuable, and as one of those leaders who is really moving the ball forward. Someone who inspires everyone around him, including business leaders, innovators, and founders themselves.
And one thing that certainly speaks to that and caught our attention, I know, is something that Alexandra, the head of design and innovation at Assembly OSM, on Andrew's team, said of him in part 1 of this series.
And so he's incredibly ambitious. He's incredibly connective. He always says that a rising tide lifts all boats, and so he's very much working across other companies and other entities to make sure we're all collaborating as much as we can.
That's right, and that is a sign of true leadership. That idea that it's not just about one person or one company, but lifting all of us together. But put a pin in that, we'll come back to it. And as we get ready to continue our interview with Andrew, let's look back on something he said just earlier in this conversation.
Because of that, we have to wear a lot of hats. And that opens up opportunities for things that would be inaccessible, but it also opens up a lot of challenges. I think on one end, because we are a developer, a design builder, a startup that's VC funded, but also debt funded, tied into the government, all of this stuff, it's allowed us to be a little bit more creative in terms of how we're funding our execution and how we think about our roadmap. So
that is exactly where we are right now, at this moment in history particularly. When it comes to building partnerships and coalitions and the collaboration and really what it takes to advance the ball forward, it is something that cannot be done in silos. It requires a multi-stakeholder collaboration and really a multidisciplinary approach.
That is exactly right. And I mean, that's why we built our agency and our team at Gordon Frost the way we did. That idea of bringing together hats from various disciplines in a way that's not been done before. Because that is what organizations need today to solve the challenges of today and also prepare for the challenges and opportunities of tomorrow. It is no longer good enough to just be one-dimensional. And you see that even in Assembly OSM's buildings, which are not just about shelter and security and comfort, but also now about so much more, about improving health and also decarbonizing our grid, our supply chains, and our lives. And that idea, that collaboration, that multidisciplinary approach really is, in many ways, the ultimate goal of Planet First Action as an initiative, to build ecosystems, to break down barriers and silos, to foster that collaboration that enables action.
That's true. It's such a good parallel. And for those who are just now tuning into the show for the very first time, that is really what this show is about. Not about politics. It's about solutions. the changes that we are going to accelerate with these new technologies, with these new jobs, the new ways of living together and working together, and what we need to do to prepare for it.
Exactly. And it's learning from leaders on the front lines of what it's going to take to prepare. And we know that it is the work that when done together collaboratively, that when we break down those silos, it is the work that will ultimately, as Andrew Staniforth says, cause all boats to rise together. And that is going to be even more important as we head into 2025. I mean, we don't know. I don't think anybody knows for sure what the next administration will bring. But what we do know, and what we feel confident in saying, is that the work will continue. It is clear just from the stats, some of the ones that we even shared last night, the over 330,000 new jobs from the climate plan, and over $360 billion in new investment. We know that, and we've heard it from leaders on the show. Leaders like Cam Lawrence, the CEO of Newlab, and Claire Doyle Dowd, who is the head of policy at Block Power.
Well, I would say we have a very strong state engagement. So at different times when there's a change in administration and challenges, having a robust relationship that's on the ground with states. States have a huge amount of capital through block grants and through other mechanisms, regulatory and other tools that they have to help facilitate a clean energy transition or to ensure that they are really abiding by the wishes of their citizens for a clean energy transition. So Block Power really has a very strong ecosystem of relationships with some of the key states across the country. The other thing that I would say is that, what Americans want and what citizens of this country really want is, they want to have jobs, they want to have a healthy community where they can have water that's safe to drink, where they are not breathing in noxious fumes that will curb their life expectancy. And the other common denominator is that people want to have independence of energy systems from other countries that might be energy independence really is kind of one of the key areas. And so Block Power cannot, we are not focused on energy independence, from other, global countries, but what we can do is by solar, wind, air source heat pumps and other mechanisms, reduce oil dependency, reduce gas dependency on other countries. So what are the things that kind of bind, us as citizens in this country? It's really around jobs, health, and safety. Right. And I think those are the things that the clean energy transition really is about. And I'm hoping that through a lot of conversations with people who have different opinions or different perspectives, that you can do that bridge building of understanding, there's not, environmental activism is really not about creating a divide. It's around kind of the common denominators that will make our country strong.
And it's true, those are the things that bind us today, and they have been consistent through time. And you can hear that in President Roosevelt's remarks during his fireside chat to the nation on April 14th, 1938. The content of which, as the nation came out of challenging times and headed into the next great wave of industrialization and economic prosperity following the war in the 1940s, is very reminiscent of how many think and feel today and the situation in which we find ourselves. Just listen to what he had to say during that fireside chat. He said, "I am constantly thinking of all our people, unemployed and employed alike, all their human problems of food and clothing and homes and education and health and old age. You and I agree that security is our greatest need. The chance to work, the opportunity of making a reasonable profit in our business, whether it is a very small business or a larger one. The possibility of selling our farm products for enough money for our families to live on decently. I know that these are the things that decide the well-being of all our people. Democracy has disappeared in several other great nations, not because the people of those nations disliked democracy, but because they had grown tired of unemployment and insecurity. We in America know that our own democratic institutions can be preserved and made to work. But in order to preserve them, we need to act together, to meet the problems of the nation boldly and to prove that the practical operation of democratic government is equal to the task of protecting the security of the people.
Wow, those words are just, it's incredible. It's incredible. One, just what he said, but also really in so many ways how true it is still to this day. I mean, right now, as we speak, the next great industrial revolution is taking place here in the United States. It's spurred forward by innovation that, especially when you step into places like here at Newlab in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, or over at Newlab's location on Ford's campus in Detroit, you see it all around you. Things from like marine logistics to farming to how we get from A to B, from how we move our goods. That kind of innovation is really what's driving us forward. It is like the engine of progress. And for those of you who are transitioning to work in this space, regardless of how or what degree, thank you so much. Transitions are never easy. They are more important now than ever before because the time is now.
That is exactly it. The time is now. And to that end, it is in these spaces that you see leaders like Newlab's CEO, Cam Lawrence, or Assembly OSM's CEO, Andrew Staniforth, who are the ones working hard to break down those barriers, to unlock that progress, and really, perhaps most importantly, to prepare our communities. And our job, collectively, is to continue to push forward that work.
That's right. And really, with that being said, let's dive back into our conversation with Andrew Staniforth. After which we'll round out this Thanksgiving special with some feedback and thoughts from the community down in Brooklyn on Assembly OSM's first building.
And here now, on stage again at Newlab, Andrew Staniforth.
Within that first year of design, we only need 6 months to open up a new factory. So you sign up on the project, you have committed revenue on that project, you then go to the bank and say, hey, I have an offtake agreement for this new facility that I want to open. They use that offtake agreement as collateral to finance that facility, and now you have non-dilutive funding your expansion. Now, to get to that place, you need a track record of building so that they know that that offtake agreement is real and stuff like that. You have to be a lot more creditworthy as a company to do that. But there's a precedent there that's used for windmills and power plants and solar farms and stuff like that you can apply to our type of business as well, even though it's a completely different industry.
Yeah, it's great to go to that point because that's exactly what's happening right now, in large part because of the policy side of things. Something we were talking about with Jackie as well is the absolute consequential nature of direct pay for those entities that previously were tax exempt, so they couldn't get any incentives for energy efficiency, things like that. Now we're actually able to do that, and to your point, get access to non-dilutive funding to actually finance these improvements. Which actually goes to one of the things we want to talk to you again about, which we touched on at the March event, which is how policy is shaping demand and shifting the ability to access capital. So you shared something that was fantastic news for you in that regard, but also important as an insight for the audience, which is that the push towards sustainability from a policy perspective helps with your investors. Because on the one hand, you have investors that are investing in Assembly OSM as a company that are saying there's going to be more demand for them, so that's good. We want to put more capital there. And there's also the investors that are investing in projects, the actual developments. They're saying, there's going to be more demand for these types of projects that are sustainable. There's not as many other players that can do that, so we're going to put the money there. So it works on both regards for you, which is great. The question is now, since we had that event, we had the announcement of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and over $20 billion that is going into decarbonization, energy, and a lot of that is actually going to be focused on the built environment. Yep. Now, admittedly, a lot of that's focused on retrofits and working with existing building stock to make it more energy efficient. But I guess the question for you is, how do you see the landscape shifting for you, knowing that you're focused on new builds as a result of that new development?
I think that type of capital is going into retrofits because it is easy to quantify the impact, right? You can look at energy use before, energy use after, subtraction, that's your savings, right? And you can do sort of carbon math on that and understand where those dollars are and how they're translating to carbon savings. With new construction, it's much harder math. It's a dark art. Embodied carbon is so difficult because the benchmarking is almost non-existent, right?
So if you say, okay, Assembly is reducing embodied carbon relative to what? And that what is a conventionally built building. They have no clue how much embodied carbon is in that building. Zero, right? And when you scratch the surface on all of these benchmarks, it is all assumption-based. And not all of them are good assumptions, right? But because it's such an amorphous problem, you have to start somewhere. And I think one of the things that is going to allow the type of capital like the GGRF money to go towards new buildings, because it's government money, they need to have an auditable, accounting of how much carbon is reduced. I think it's going to take a better understanding of embodied carbon and embodied carbon benchmarking before that type of capital is going to flow into new buildings at the quantum that it is into retrofits, because it needs to be auditable. And today, it's fuzzy math, right? And if you poke too hard, it all falls apart. And I do think that with better understanding of embodied carbon on existing buildings or conventionally built new buildings, it will very clearly demonstrate how much better Assembly is from an embodied carbon perspective. And that will unlock future funding.
That's amazing. Also, it sounds like a huge opportunity for somebody to go off and try and actually solve that problem. Seems like it's ripe for someone to go out and start undertaking. Yeah. But from your perspective, I think it's really interesting. I mean, one of the stated goals that you have is actually being climate positive.
Yep.
So talk to us a little bit what that vision is and kind of how you plan on getting there.
Yeah, this was actually a discussion internally about what are our big goals, right? And the thing that really resonated was net zero is do less bad, right? It's not do good. It's okay, we're not doing bad anymore, but we're not doing good either, and we've done a lot of damage already. So if we just get to zero, we're kind of still not in a good spot. And so we discussed, well, what should we be aspiring towards, right? Can we go beyond? What about our business allows us to go beyond? And I think that the core thing that allowed us to reach the point where we said, yes, we can go out and publicly say that we're aiming for beyond net zero, is the fact that our business is a platform business. And what I mean by that is, yes, we build with steel-based chassis today and wall cassettes and bathroom pods and kitchen pods, but that's not the core of the business. The core of the business is this process-driven approach to building buildings. And with that understanding of what the business truly is, you then can realize, well, in the next decade, 2 decades, right, what's going to happen in material science? And is that innovation and the trillions of dollars that are going, maybe not trillions, billions of dollars that are going into developing the next bio-based alternatives and stuff like that, are those innovations going to make our business better or worse? Are those innovations going to be better when deployed in our approach to building buildings, or better deployed in conventional construction? And without a doubt, it's always better deployed through us. So if you think about where the world is going from a foundational technology perspective, the stuff that's coming out of universities, the stuff that is being funded by grant dollars, those innovations need a vehicle to be put in buildings. Assembly is that vehicle. I don't have a secret pathway on how we're going to get past net zero, right? But what we are doing and being very conscious of is, as innovation happens across materials and processes and stuff like that, they get swapped out for our more carbon intensive systems. And as we do that, it allows us to reach those more lofty goals by being the platform and the vehicle for those innovations accessing the market, as opposed to us having to be the one that has all the secret sauce around how to decarbonize everything. And I think that for us, we don't have to be the foundational technology provider for everything. There is some critical pieces that we have developed foundational technology, but for us, it's more about that platform that sits on top of all of this foundational technology built by others, built by us, that allows us to drive towards those much more lofty goals.
It's so interesting because there's this insight that is probably crystallizing for a lot that are working in this space right now. Is it certainly true in energy generation? Is the resilience and sustainability benefits you get from distribution as an approach, and having distributed assets, having all of these things not centralized in one place. I mean, it's a kind of the classic financial lesson: don't have all your eggs in one basket. But applying that in all of these different systems, whether it's energy or to the process from Assembly OSM of actually how you are creating these modules to stack them. Having that distributed approach has so many different benefits, and to your point, unlocks greater benefits of all of those new materials that are coming online as well. And I think just want to go back to one thing, because it is important for a lot in this audience, because for people working in sustainability, there's often this, and we're certainly guilty of it at Gordon Frost as well, and with the Planet for Stash community, of just carbon is just carbon. But the truth is, it's not just carbon. Obviously, there's all of the other greenhouse gases as well, but particularly what you were just talking about, the difference between embodied carbon and operational carbon. And that's not a distinction that is often talked about enough. And so to give the audience a little bit more context on what Andrew was talking about, when it comes to embodied carbon, that is the carbon that is emitted as a result of putting up that building in the first place. Everything from the materials mining to the transportation to the construction itself. I'm sure there's other parts of that. But at that point, that carbon is emitted as a result of that building there, and that is just there. Versus the carbon that continues to be emitted as a result of using the building. And I think that's, again, something that's worth doubling down on, the difference for you guys, because you have the ability to reduce on both ends.
On both ends. And this is actually one of those things that when we thought about the carbon story on both of these, right, embodied and operational, I actually learned a very interesting sort of concept. Because of where we are from a climate change perspective, and where temperatures have gone, there's this notion of time value of carbon, where carbon reduced 10 years from now by putting in a more high efficiency HVAC system is actually worth less than carbon reduced today. Because we need to change the shape of that curve today. And so when we think about, and this is actually the opposite of where the dollars are going, but we should be putting all of our energy and all of our dollars towards embodied carbon, because that is the thing that is going to change the shape of the curve much more radically and quickly than focusing on operational carbon, right? So it is more important to solve the embodied carbon problem today, because if we don't change the shape of the curve, we have bigger problems, right? But the flip side of that is it's so hard to understand and quantify, and from a financing perspective, you can't audit it because it's the dark arts, right? So the money and the resources and the attention is going to operational carbon because it's very easy. And it also has sort of the double bottom line with owners, because it saves on energy, right? It saves on dollars. And the operational carbon does not have as direct a translation to cost yet. I think that has to be solved. The conversation has to start introducing this notion of time value of carbon, because what we do need is better benchmarking of embodied carbon, which will lead to better capital flows towards embodied carbon, which will then change the shape of the temperature rise curves, which will then allow us to actually address the root of the problem, which is we're trying to stem climate change.
Right. That is, one, I think that's absolutely right. And I think it's brilliant the way that you're actually able to really sum it up in a way that people can really understand and really understand really the impact it's going to have just today, but also in the future. But it also gets back to the root of the problem, which is actually, okay, well, that takes policy. Like that takes people to actually sit down, get in a room together, craft legislation about what really matters, and then actually go chase it, right? As a community and as a society.
I think the most important thing, if you want to hedge against any outcome, is translate to economics. right? And if your business works, it will work regardless of what administration we're in. If your business requires policy and subsidy, you should be thinking hard about what you can do to make your business work without it. I think it's hard, especially for purely sustainability-focused businesses. But for us, we have both the housing crisis and the climate crisis, and we are solving both regardless of whether the conversation is around climate change or not, and whether there's dollars going towards that. Like, our approach solves both, whether you want to solve both or not. And I think that is a good thing about our business, right? It is a good business at its core, and it's not just in that the nice to have. And I think the key thing is thinking about, if you're starting a business or running a business related to climate change and sustainability, I think everyone has recognized the shift from sustainability being a nice to have to a need to have. But I think what you need to do is think about why for your business has that shift happened, right? Has that shift happened because the economics have now made it more, it underwrites better or whatever because it's more sustainable? Or is it because purely policy has changed? And at what level of government has that policy changed, right? So you also think about federal versus state versus city politics. If your business serves a market like New York, I'm not super worried about what's happening at the federal level, right? New York has local law 97, right? Like, sustainability is going to remain a priority in New York City regardless of the election. If you are serving other markets, that might not be the case, and you should think about how that could affect your business.
That's amazing. I think that's an important point for the audience to take home, is that it's not just about the what in terms of where we've arrived, but it's at the why that got us there, especially when it comes to sustainability across those different industries.
Yep.
And that's actually what we'll take as the first set of advice for the first stakeholders, for the founders. Because as you know, Planet First Action is about bringing together disparate types of stakeholders to facilitate that conversation in a way that is meaningful, but to enable action. And so we've got your advice now for founders to think about the why, not just the what.
Yep.
But what would be your advice for the investors, and especially those that are not just kind of in the VC and at the forefront of sustainability in VC? How should they start to think about this changing landscape?
Yeah, I think from an investor perspective, there's a lot of noise when it comes to things that have government involvement, things that have regulatory involvement, things that are actual hard problems. And I think from an investor perspective, it's really important to dig through the noise and find the real businesses. I do worry that sustainability and climate change is something that is easy to put into a hype cycle. Definitely not at the level of like crypto or AI, but like there is some level of ability to sort of like ride the wave. And I do think that you have to think deeper about the business than just where sort of the sentiment is. I also think that a lot of businesses that solve real problems in sustainability and climate change are really hard businesses, right? Like, to do what we are trying to do, we are changing the most legacy industry in the history of humankind. Like, it's a hard problem. And look for founders and teams that understand how hard their problem is. I've actually gotten feedback from investors that have passed on Assembly when we were raising money historically. And it's very funny. One investor, I asked, why did you pass on us? Like, I just very candidly, about a year after our Series A. And he said, it seemed like what you were doing was really hard. And you told us it was hard. And you told us that your first buildings would have problems and that you'd learn from them. And they had invested in another competitor. And they said that competitor told them that their first projects would be wildly profitable. They invested in that one. That company's no longer existing. And we have a first building up. There were problems. We learned from them. We now have a much stronger business because of it. But it was just the appetite for investors to understand that what we are doing is hard and it's going to require mistakes and moving up the learning curve to achieve the type of impact that we're aiming for from a company perspective.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I mean, that is your story too, right? And that basically breeds back to, okay, well, look, why you are the strong business that you happen to be today is because of the mistakes and because you built that building however many times in your parking lot to figure it out. I mean, that's what it takes. So, but thinking about another stakeholder group, we need to start thinking about the policymakers.
Yeah.
So you already mentioned a couple. So you have Local Law 97, you have Bento, there's a GGRF that basically is happening. So when you start talking about the policymakers and you start thinking about, okay, well, what's the next iteration that actually has to happen when these things start coming around again? So what would you tell them? What would be the version 2.0?
Yeah. I would give them, I would make sure that all policy makers understand the time value of carbon and how quickly we need to deploy resources and policy to actually make a dent. And so advice for sort of policymakers is be unapologetically bold right now. We don't have time. We don't have time to be political, right? And that's a very hard thing to say to an elected official that has to be political to remain relevant. But I do think that in this moment, and we talk about this as a crisis moment, it doesn't always feel like a crisis moment based on how quickly and swiftly the action is coming through. Now, sometimes it is, right? But I do think that we need to have very bold, unapologetic policymakers that are taking a stand and fighting for it, even if it is unpopular. That is very, very difficult. But I do think it's very important. I do think the other thing for policymakers to understand, and I've started to scrub in a little bit on sort of like local politics, is the loudest voices you hear will likely be in opposition to these things, but they are the loud minority. And so one of the things that I've started doing with a couple friends is trying to make sure that politicians understand that there is a large majority of people out there that are supportive of bold decisions, bold action to really build a better New York and a better state and country. And I do think that is something that like policymakers, when they are taking things that seem counter to political aspirations or strategy, there is support for it. And you have to try to help cultivate that community so that you have the support, because it is a political game. You have to get reelected. And so be bold, but also find the supporters that will guard you against the political backlash if you are being bold.
Yeah, exactly. It's really about, creating that support system that you need in order to kind of affect change. Because at the end of the day, you need a backstop to make sure that, again, you're able to continue on with that change. So now, in thinking about municipalities, because it's just so interesting when you start thinking about, at the end of the day, it's all going to boil down to, okay, you have a place, you have a local, you have to build something somewhere. So when you start thinking about that, and there's multiple problems, there's multiple crises. You yourself mentioned already, you guys solve actually two at the exact same time.
Yep.
So now, beyond actually reaching out to you guys and say, okay, well, look, this is where it is, like, what other advice would you give them?
For municipalities, every city, town is different. And every city, town has different strengths. And I think one of the important things for municipalities to understand is, what is your super strength, and deploy it with rigor. So I think in some places it is manufacturing capacity. In some places it is the labor market. In a market like New York City has so much land. They should be building so much right now, and deploying what makes New York City very unique is the city. You look at NYCHA, you look at city-owned land, we could be solving the housing crisis today, right? Just with the city changing a little bit around how they deploy land. Now, that obviously takes political will, governmental will, administrative will, but if the municipalities understand what their secret strength is and just go all in on that, we actually could make a real dent. So find that and deploy it like crazy. I do think that municipalities and policymakers are very much in the same, like, you have to have the political support as sort of a strategy there. But if you find what your secret strength is, New York has so much land that we're not building on, and we find a way to activate it quickly, we will actually make a real dent in what we're trying to achieve.
We have to say, at the beginning of the episode, we told the audience that we were really excited for this conversation. We were sure that they all see exactly why, because this has been amazing. You've shared so many insightful comments and just things that people can take home and really use to propel their business, to propel their work, wherever they're working. Yeah. But we can't let you go without giving the audience a little bit more insight, as we always do, into who is Andrew. Not just the CEO of Assembly OSM, but who are you as a person? And so I have a few fun questions for you. The first one's maybe easy, maybe not, because it's maybe been a while, but with your work, just like for many in this community, there's a lot going on. There's always packed schedules. You probably haven't had a chance to have a lazy Sunday in a number of years, and maybe not for quite a while. But if you were afforded a lazy Sunday to do whatever you want, where would you be and what would you be doing?
Not on a yacht.
Not on a yacht. I don't know anyone with a yacht. I love heat. This is actually like give me 100-degree weather. I'd probably be somewhere hot reading. I love nonfiction. Or with my family. Either one.
That's great. That's
You
great.
share that with Ryan too. Ryan, somehow he does it.
Yeah, heat is definitely my thing, and then also I'm a big fan of nonfiction as well. It actually leads to my question, which is just so funny. It works out that way. What book has had the most profound impact on you?
Wow. I'm not going to give you a specific book, but I will give you a type of book. I am obsessed with Churchill biographies.
Interesting.
Yeah.
He's a fascinating man.
He's fascinating. And I think there's so many sort of like layers of stories in there around crisis management, personal reinvention, and he's also just like a weird dude who's like very funny to read. But I think he's just someone that is very interesting, and you read a new biography and you get like another layer, and it's just been very, very interesting to read that. I'm currently audiobooking a book about the Revolutionary War, which is very fascinating. The insight that I've had so far, and I'm just at the very beginning, is my image of the Revolutionary War is almost as if the US was at the scale it is today, but it was so tiny. So like you're talking about like these battles that you learn about in elementary school and high school and stuff like that, and they're just like so much smaller than in my head I had built them up to be. And it's kind of fascinating when you apply that to today's world in terms of what's happening from a geopolitical perspective, like how small these little things in the Revolutionary War were, and yet the impact for the last 200 plus years has been like what little things of small groups of people today are going to be the thing that fundamentally pivots the whole world for the next 200 years. So that's just, an interesting, I don't know, chapter 3 in. But that's just one of the realizations I've had so far on that book.
It's going to be the people who figured out solving the math for embodied carbon.
Yeah, maybe. For sure.
Okay, so at the end of every interview, what we ask is that, you've had an amazing career, chrono career, and then also just building up this company. You have so much reach, and I think our audience is also fully shared in terms of kind of really what you have to offer in terms of advice and knowledge and being able to really put it to work. So give us some advice. So tell us what you actually believe that you've done really right, what you actually wish you would have actually done differently, and then also people who are just now getting into the marketplace and in the workforce. What kind of advice would you share with them?
What have I done right? I think I've been very lucky.
Make sure.
No, I actually think, I don't know if anyone has heard sort of like luck is a surface area problem, right? You just need to have a large enough surface area to receive luck. And so, for example, the way that I sort of like got connected back to Assembly is, Shop was working on this high-rise modular problem. And because I had known some of the people that were at Shop working on this, I was talking to them about the business, telling them why I thought they needed to change some fundamental things, and just offering free advice. And all of a sudden I'm the CEO, right? And so you just sort of like put it out there, put sort of like good energy out there. You never know what's going to sort of convert into the next big opportunity. And I sort of like kind of operate everything related to that. Like you don't know who you're going to meet, what, receptionist is actually, going to put a good word in for an investment. Like you just have to sort of like increase that surface area of luck. Maybe it's tied into karma, but like, if you can sort of operate that way, that you never know what's going to sort of be the turning point or sort of thing that's going to put you on the next trajectory. I think that is, sort of how I operate on that side. What could I have done differently? Is that
Or better yet, what did you do wrong?
what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
I make no mistakes.
Ever.
What did I do wrong? I don't think about things that way. I always think about what I learned. Like I don't ever think like, what did I do wrong sort of implies regret. I do not operate that way. I operate that mistakes are learnings and put me on a new path. So there were like some awful, learning points where like you're like, raising money for various assembly and pre-assembly where you're like, I'm never like, this is gonna all fall apart and like, why have I been pitching so badly? But then it becomes the like, okay, take a step back. My message is not being received. What do I need to change? And I'm going to change it. So yeah, like.
That's a great philosophy.
I don't know. It's such a hard question because I just don't think that way. I do think one of the things, advice, and this is probably maybe earlier on, in school, I don't think, I was not a particularly I was a fine student, right? Like went to good schools, but like I was not like the A+ student. Learn how you learn early. And I don't think I did that until fairly recently. And I learned by doing, talking, figuring it out, right? Like I'm a tinkerer. School is not that way. Like a lecture, to me, I just shut down. I can't be spoken to. Like I can't, I don't process that way. And I wish I had known that there were other ways of working the system, like go to office hours. Like I never did that. And like, I feel like that would have I would have had a deeper learning experience if I had known how I had learned when I was actually in school. Because I love learning, but I love learning the way I learn, and I hated learning in school. And I think that is just one of the things that, like, if I had done that earlier, had that realization earlier, I would have had a deeper depth of understanding coming out of school than I do today. And I've sort of had to like relearn things that I probably have learned in school, but they didn't sink in because I didn't learn it the way I needed to learn it.
That's great advice, and it continues to apply even beyond school for
Yeah.
those that are continuing their professional development. So that's fantastic. Last but not least, we have, again, part of the mission of Plan for Section is that exchange of ideas, that facilitation of dialogue and asking questions more than anything else. We have a question for you from actually a member of the March event, the Plan for Section community. And we're going to ask you to write down a question for our next guest. And our next guest is Jeff Prosserman, who's the founder of VoltPost. We're going to get into some more about Jeff. He's another fantastic speaker and founder and just entrepreneur, and he's got a whole bunch to share, and we're excited for that. But Jeff's working in electric vehicle charging. So we'll look forward to your question for Jeff for next week. But in the meantime, your question is from Suresh Ara, who's a founder himself, also working in EV charging. But it's just for all of the founders that are out there right now, what can you share from an advice perspective about what they be thinking about as they enter the funding climate? What is it like right now to get funding?
It's rough. Very practical advice. Give yourself more time than you expect. Build a really efficient funnel process, right? One of our core beliefs is it only takes one. Only takes one. There are thousands of investors. It only takes one, right? So it is a top of funnel problem that you need to solve and build a really efficient way of moving people through that funnel to get to a place where you have that term sheet. If you've never done it before, I remember doing our first fundraise, and it was completely foreign to the way that I had raised money in the past. So get smart on how to do that. Talk to other people that are raising money right now. The other thing is, when you're raising money, everyone wants to give you advice. No one knows your business, the way you know your business. So don't take literal advice. Take it in advisement, but make sure you understand how it applies to your business, because you want to avoid that pendulum swinging, right? Some advice is good. Some advice is just they don't have all the information that you have, and you have to be able to filter that when you're doing your fundraise.
That's perfect. That's great advice for the founders. And again, thank you so much for taking the time
absolutely.
to be here with us. We know, again, how your schedule is. And so to be here on this stage especially, talking about what it takes to unlock capital to address not just getting us down the curve, but to change the shape of the curve so we can actually address these problems in a meaningful way. It means the world to Ryan and I, to the entire team.
100%.
Thank you.
Wow. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Andrew Staniforth. He is such an incredible leader. And what he has accomplished throughout his career and now at Assembly OSM is really an example and a model for how it should be done. And we are just so grateful for his insights, which we know that so many people can learn from and also be inspired by.
That's true.
And now, as we start closing out this Thanksgiving special, let's head back down this road just a little ways from Newlab over to St. Felix Street and learn from the community about what they think about this amazing technology and the process that Assembly OSM has achieved and built, which frankly is hiding in plain sight, which passerbys on the street would never even think twice about unless they were here the day that it was stacked.
It's true. It's one of those things that unless you know it, you might miss it. And it is hiding so much. There's so much behind what they've accomplished there. And we'll see to that end if they can even believe the fact that it was stacked in just one day. So let's go. Would you believe it if I told you that building was built in one day? No? You know, actually, that building was built by a company called Assembly OSM. They prefabricated all of it in New Jersey. They shipped it in and stacked it and built it in one day.
Well,
Yeah.
is it Is it in good shape? We're staying up.
Yeah, it's actually, they're saying it's the strongest building in the area.
Yeah, strongest building in the neighborhood. They stacked that entire thing in 10 hours.
That's good contractors.
Yeah.
That's what I can say. That's good contractors.
Do you live in the area?
Yeah, I actually do.
You do?
What do you think of it, just in terms of how
It looks nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. One day.
Yeah.
Say one day.
One day.
Oh,
Yeah.
One day.
Must be worth a lot of money.
It's actually it's really their test. So it's not that they didn't build it in terms of the value of it. They really built it to prove the concept that you can build a building like that in a modular format in a factory,
Stackable.
and they brought it in and stacked it all in one day.
Oh, wow.
And so that way they weren't as disruptive on the community in terms of having the construction zoned for a much longer period of time. They were able to do the foundation work, but then bring in the modules and stand it all up in just one day.
Is it going to be cheaper than the buildings we're building in our neighborhoods right now?
That's a great question.
Rent-wise.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that they've committed, because this is in a landmarked area. They had to meet the area median income, the AMI, in terms of what it's actually charged at. This itself is not specifically deemed affordable housing, but that's actually what they're trying to solve as a company, is the housing crisis, by being able to stand up all of these new buildings that are not only affordable, but also for the residents that go and live there are much healthier. They save the money, but they also just improve their livelihoods in terms of their health and well-being.
I hope so, because in my neighborhood, there's a lot of buildings going up. And thank God I'm old, I've got it. Most people can't find housing.
That's it.
Do you live in this area?
No, I live on the other side.
Okay.
But all around me, I can see tall skyscrapers, and I know that people that I know looking for apartments for months and years. They have to wait 7 years to get help from the government, and they're putting up stuff. So they need to put up more affordable housing.
Exactly.
Where working people can find a decent apartment.
Exactly.
And stop making them like little boxes with human beings.
Exactly.
When you have a bedroom, all you can have is like a half of a bedroom set in there. It's not fair. Then your next generation are raising like the animals in a little stall.
Exactly.
Put some more space.
More affordable housing.
More affordable and make it livable.
Exactly.
All you fellas live in nice, livable. I live in a livable place.
Exactly.
Children need to grow up with space.
Dignity. You need the space to live with dignity.
Dignity.
Really.
Yeah. It's a new construction technique called modular skyscrapers.
Uh-huh.
And so what they did is they actually fabricated the building actually in New Jersey, staged it on the George Washington Bridge, and then one at a time they actually brought it up, and they had 8 units they stacked up on top of each other, and they did it in 10 hours.
That's amazing.
So
If you look at this building, it looks like it blends in with like the rest of the neighborhood. They've done a great job of being a part of the community, but the fact is that is one of the most advanced climate tech companies.
I was going to say, this is not an eyesore.
Exactly.
Like a lot of the buildings that we're seeing right now with private architecture, which is not, capitalism, get your money, I guess, right? Like you're doing what you're doing, but there's an incongruence in the city right now that is causing a lot of ailments in New York because, for one, people don't feel that they're in alignment with what's happening with the new architecture of the city, let alone the fact that the architecture doesn't necessarily represent who they are.
Right.
So that was the first thing I noticed about the building, was that it blended into the buildings around it. I think Spike Lee would like this building.
Yeah. What's interesting is that obviously this is a landmark area.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, that's basically why the facade is the way that it is.
Right.
It also speaks to the versatility behind the idea and the technology that they have. It's because you can actually adapt and retrofit what you need to in order to kind of be place-based where the community needs.
So they did the right thing.
Exactly.
There you go.
That was the Spike Lee stamp of approval might be one of the biggest accolades for a building that's coming into building, because there's a lot of change happening right now.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Do you live in the area?
I used to live around the corner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you live in the area?
No, I haven't been down this area in a while.
Yeah.
And I'm lost because there's so many new buildings around here.
Yeah.
I'm like, where am I?
It's true.
But wow, that is absolutely fantastic.
Well, that's actually the thing that's beautiful about what Assembly OSM is doing. Because what they're doing is they're not reducing the overall time in terms of and the quality of the materials, but they're doing that work at a different location. They're not doing it on site where the building is actually going to be. They do all that hard work in a contained environment, warehouse, so that it's built to quality, built to all of the specs that it needs to be of the highest quality, and then shipping it and just stacking it. Unlike traditional construction, where they're actually trying to do all of that work on site.
Yeah.
And they're working, to your point, they're working against time, and there's incentives to go faster, maybe use lower quality materials. Whereas Assembly OSM, the process they have with their distributed supply chain, they actually can focus on bringing the highest quality and do it in a way that doesn't reduce costs or disrupt the neighborhood.
That's good. See, that's why gentrification is also necessary, because it enables that type of innovation. Because we do need to be able to create quality, and we have to expedite the process at the same time. So how do we intersect? That's the definition of a miracle, in my definition, right? Is time and resources are intersecting. There is hope for those buildings yet. And as you can see, Exhibit A, like, if this thing was really built in a day, then we could start right now. You know what I mean? Like, it's always a state of now. I have a question for you about those windows, right? Mm-hmm. What was the architect's vision for the windows? Let's talk about like the border. Let's talk about its coloration.
Because it's a landmarked area, they had pretty strict guidelines in terms of what they needed to do to match, to make sure that it is cohesive. And so I think in terms of the building facade itself, a lot of that was them adhering to actually how do you make sure that you stay a part of the community and also the history of the community as well.
Yeah, okay.
And also there's a technology aspect to it as well.
That's what I was getting at.
What you have to worry about is making sure, because this is as close to, you know what passive house is? So what this actually does is making sure those windows are actually made in that kind of way to meet those kind of requirements.
So is this for sale or what?
There's a
Or
final
is it just
tape.
a demonstration?
No, it is a test project, but there is 2 units in it. There's going to be a commercially available for like a community-based organization on the bottom floor, but then there is 2 units that are duplexes that are going to be in just a matter of weeks available for the market for people to come in.
I feel like I'm family with y'all. Like
It feels like it.
I feel like I could just have Thanksgiving with y'all, pass the pumpkin pie. Like, this right here is what this is all about. And I knew I could trust y'all because of that shirt.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. By the way, Jacob.
What's up?
Yes, and Ryan.
Ryan, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, call me on contact.
It'll be all right if we include some of your remarks for the episode?
Yeah, go ahead. What now?
Awesome. Thank you.
Once again, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you.
Have a good day.
All right.
Thanks for stopping. Wow. Now, this really is the end. And thank you so much to everyone who joined us for this Thanksgiving special. From part 1 on Thanksgiving Eve to part 2 yesterday, and now closing it out with part 3 tonight.
Woo! We have had a blast. We have learned so much, and we are so grateful to these leaders who are pushing boundaries and doing that important work that we talked about at the beginning, that idea of knocking down barriers, breaking down silos. And we are so grateful to all of you listening in and being here in the chat with us, because if it weren't for you, it would be like that tree falling in the forest without anyone there to hear it. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for making this a possibility.
Again, there is just so much more to learn about Assembly OSM, and we really encourage you to all head over to assemblyosm.com to learn more about this project, their second project actually that's happening in Harlem, and also their capability and plans for the future under the fantastic leadership of CEO Andrew Staniforth.
And of course, if you haven't yet, be sure to check out Newlab.com to learn about the world's leading venture platform. I'll just say that one more time. The world's leading venture platform. And the incredible work that they are doing on the cutting edge of materials, mobility, and energy. Under CEO Cam Lawrence's leadership, they really are a gold mine of insights and inspiration, and we are so grateful to them.
And finally, you can learn more about Planet First Action, and join our community and really tap into additional resources or catch up on previous episodes and really join us in building this ecosystem of action by heading over to planetfirstaction.com. We are so grateful for you all for listening in, and we really hope to see you there.
And on top of that, you can also learn more about the agency behind Planet First Action by visiting gordonandfrost.com. The incredible experts on the team are here to serve our partners as they navigate these transitions and innovate the future. We hope to hear from you. Last, but certainly not least, please help us get the word out even more about this show and the amazing work that so many of these leaders are advancing. And to do that, please like, share, and subscribe here on YouTube and also over on Apple or Spotify and also on the social channels on Instagram and Blue Sky. Check it out, subscribe there as well, and please share it all along, especially with the 3 exciting shows featuring incredible leaders from across the world that you need to know about as we close out 2024, including our next holiday special at the end of the year.
That's right. And so with that, we really hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.